to transportation, some of the jobs that clearly are not paying as much, they're much harder to staff. Their day-to-day work can be physically exhaustive, mentally exhaustive. Not that teachers is not, but of course we're paying them considerably less. I think the key is that we always talk about wages, and it's not that a living wage is not important, because we all know, especially in this valley, that it's crucial. It's crucial for us to live and to prosper and to raise our families. But people also work for recognition. They work for encouragement. They work for pride in systems. There's a lot of things that we could be doing a little bit better in encouraging our staff and increasing a certain level of pride to work in the district. We're the second biggest employer in Garfield County, only second to the hospital, okay? There's a lot more that we can be doing, and while increasing those wages is important, I think that we need to take a more a global view on this, okay? Because it's not just a wage at the end of the day that creates pride in the system and creates an environment where people want to return to work.
Okay, thank you for that answer. Darlene, how will you ensure that they have access to fair pay, health benefits, professional development opportunities, and retirement security?
I agree with Megan that the environment, the working environment is important, but I will say that it does come to pay. Our paraprofessionals often do the same work that our teachers are doing in the classrooms. They often have small groups of students. They are, some of them are doing lesson plans for some of these groups, and they're not getting paid what to do the job that they're actually doing. Some paraprofessionals are also working with high-risk students or at-risk students, and that puts them at risk as well, because I am a tall, big girl, but I have seen paras that are students that are the same size as me and paras that are very tiny, and they still work with students who are stronger than they are, and they're in jobs that it's not just helping a kid with work or whatever. There are some paraprofessional jobs that are they can be in a dangerous situation, and I think aside from training, they've got to have professional development training for the work that they're doing that is consistent and ongoing. Teachers get professional development that keeps going, but we have to pay our classified staff if we want them to stay, because they can't afford to stay here if they don't. So it's just as much as teacher retention. When we talk about staff retention, this is our staff too, and we need to make sure that they're getting paid for the work that they're doing, and that we, to value them is one thing, but to have them stay, they have to make the money to be able to stay.
Okay, thank you for those answers. Megan, we'll be asking question 2 for you to start. Teacher and staff retention. Over the course of the last few years, we've seen an alarmingly high staff turnover rate in Garfield RE-2. Staff turnover isn't what's best for providing the best possible education environment for our students or the best possible working environment for our staff. What steps will you take to recruit and retain high-quality teachers and staff, especially in hard-to-fill positions?
That's an excellent question, and I think it comes down to being a lot more competitive with our wages. We are in a very difficult position where we're at geographically, because we don't have the same property tax base as RE-1 does. Fortunately, our tax base is higher than Parachute School District, but we lie smack in the middle of a very expensive valley, where it's not uncommon to commute great lengths for a higher wage. And we've seen that over and over again, where our teachers are commuting from the central Garfield County area to, the western Garfield County area to central Garfield County, even as far as Pickett and Eagle counties, mostly because of rate or wage increases. So we've got to be a lot more competitive, and we've done salary surveys in the last few years. It's time to do another one. It's also time to start hitting the board for some of those pay increases. We need to be a lot more competitive with those wages. But I also go back in quality of work environment. It's not that I believe that we have a poor quality of work environment, but there's always opportunity to increase that sense of pride. Again, I also very strongly believe that people work for more than just a wage. I'm not making that a top priority. I guess what I'm saying is I believe that it's a two-factor approach. I also think that we need to address housing. It's very difficult to live here, and there's some opportunity for the district to really step in and be a leader in our community for paving the way for some housing.
Okay, thank you for that. Darlene, what steps will you take to recruit and retain high-quality teachers and staff, especially in hard-to-fill positions?
Absolutely, it comes back to the wages again. People are driving to Eagle from, I know teachers that are in Grand Junction driving to Eagle because of the pay and the difference, and their pay is a lot different. But making sure that we're staying competitive, we have to pay the same or more as what that they're getting in other districts around us. So we are at or near the bottom of our peers, so that does make recruitment really difficult. And I will say too, it's also the people are coming in. When most people come in when most people come in to teach, they're not starting at the bottom. They're kind of coming in at the middle, and that range is really low. So when that mid-entry is something that we need to look at too, not just the starting, but looking at that mid-range, because it's not great. And then benefits too, making sure that, I think the 4-day school week right now is a benefit that we have that is keeping a lot of our teachers here. But also looking at housing, we do have there's so much construction going on around here, and the school district should be tapping some of the construction that's going on here to say, if we can contribute some funds, how can we make 2 of these units housing for staff or teachers? That's something that I don't think that's been explored enough. So I would agree with the absolutely benefits and pay.
And Steve, what steps will you take to recruit and retain high-quality teachers and staff, especially in hard-to-fill positions?
It's tough to follow up at the end, but yeah, it comes down to the money, right? So we need to rally the community, right? We need to, I think the majority of people that are not wildly involved in the school district don't quite understand how close we are to a crisis situation. And my wife has been a teacher in the district for 20 years. That means in the next 10 years, she's going to be retired, along with our entire friends group, right? There's our most stable population of teachers are in the 15 plus years, right? So when we start getting higher and higher retirement rates, right now we have less than one person on average to apply for every position we have open. Let's be honest, our pay is not great. Our benefits, it costs, if a teacher in the district has a baby, it costs $10,000 out of pocket with insurance. How many people know that? I didn't know that until I got the bill after my kid was born, right? And I was mentally prepared for 6, and 10 was devastating, right? We're paying teachers $50,000 at child rearing age, and it costs them 20% of their gross to have a child. That's rough. We need to laser focus on rallying this community behind our school districts. Things are not getting better at the federal level, they're not getting better at the state level. This community needs to back up our teachers, we need to back up the school district. We need to work with the hospital, we need to work with town councils, we need to work with everybody that has a creative idea of how do we get more money into this district, how do we get teachers living here, and how do we make it easy for people to raise a family here and be part of our school district. Not only that, cheerleading our, saying terrible things about our school districts drives people out of our school district, right? We have a ton of things to celebrate, especially in the last couple of weeks. Coleridge High School is the highest performing high school from Vail to Grand Junction to Basalt. That's fantastic, right? We're 162 out of 170 some odd districts in the state for funding, right? We're the actual bottom of the barrel funding, and we're performing in the 120s. Nobody wants to be performing on a 120 out of anything, but we're getting pretty good bang for our buck. We need to celebrate our teachers. We have a great school system. Throw everybody behind it, and we need to get this done because it's critical.
Okay, moving to question 3. Darlene, payroll accuracy and accountability. Payroll errors and delays impact employee trust. We've seen issues with payroll already this year, and it has had a tangible impact on the financial security of Garfield RE-2 staff. What specific measures will you support to ensure payroll is accurate, timely, and accountable?
I would say a lot of this comes back to staff again. I remember when I first started here, we had the same payroll person for 20 years and the same financial director for probably a little bit longer than that. And in the last couple of years, we've had a lot of turnover in the office. Just, so people are coming in and they're having to learn the job on the fly because they're being hired without enough time to get any professional training. And when you're dealing with people's pay, that's a big deal. So I think keeping our staff and making sure that we're getting people that are qualified in what they're doing, but also that they stay. And some of that is, I know at the district office and in a lot of our buildings, we have people that are doing lots of different jobs at the same time. So if just making sure that people have the time to do the job that they're supposed to be doing, and that there is support for those people in the office and for whatever job that they're doing. But the payroll accuracy, when you get your paycheck and it's not right, that can't happen. But also, I think just knowing when you get extra pay for something, that whole process, it used to be really difficult to do that. So streamlining our processes for when coaches get paid or when somebody is doing something outside of the school time that they get extra pay for, streamlining that process is another thing that we can do to help create accuracy.
Okay, Steve, what specific measures will you support to ensure payroll is accurate, timely, and accountable?
I think this one's fairly straightforward. I would bring it up with the superintendent and ask him why it's the case and what we need to do to fix it, and follow up with that it's fixed. Right, this is an operations problem. This is not a school board problem, and I've not heard of this before, but that's a very reasonable thing to demand for the staff to be paid properly. So I would demand that of our superintendent and make it go. That's the ball's in his court. The leadership's job is to put the right people in the right position, not tell them how to do their job. So I would have them fix it.
And Megan, what specific measures will you support to ensure payroll is accurate, timely, and accountable?
I also agree with Steve that this is not directly a school board issue. It is the superintendent's job and role and responsibility. given that, obviously, it is the board's opportunity to kind of step in and create an opportunity for change when necessary. But we don't exactly know, based on this question, what went wrong or if there is a failure in the system. But obviously, looking at just how the systems work and where there is opportunity for improvement. It is my experience that a lot of these major corporations are not actually doing payroll in-house. Stuff is submitted. So we don't know based on this where the failure was at, but it is absolutely the superintendent's job to figure out where that's at, where the failure lies, and how to fix it, because it is unacceptable that any of our staff would not be getting paid in a timely manner. The job is difficult. It's already taxing enough, and we can't not be paying. So this is critical to me, but I also want to say that this is an operations piece as well. So I definitely agree with Steve. We need to review care and control of our operation and figure out where that shortcoming is and solve it quickly.
Okay, moving to question 4. Steve, you'll answer first. Union collaboration. Our local educators association, West Garfield Education Association, that includes both certified and classified staff, has resources including 40,000 educators at the state level and almost 3 million members at the national level. Although not every staff member is a member of WGEA, WGEA has a responsibility to represent all RE-2 staff legally as well as through collaborative solutions. How do you see a collaboration between WGEA and the school board in support of our students and staff?
I spent about 10 years as a teacher in RE-1, and several of those years were on the interest-based bargaining committee, which is similar to collaborative, you know, the analogous to collaborative solutions. So we've been at the table, and you know, the reality is the teachers union and teachers in general and the school board have the same interest, right? And that's improving our schools and educating our kids. So the teachers are boots on the ground, right? So again, my background is operations, at least in the last 10 years since I was in RE-1. And you know, if you don't know if the people at the board table or in the C-suite, whatever it might be, don't understand or don't communicate with the people on the ground, then you have policy driving chaos. And when you listen to the people that are implementing the policy, and you might see, or you very likely will see, where that policy turns into a bottleneck or an obstacle as opposed to opening those bottlenecks and obstacles. Right? Our job is not to make teachers' lives difficult. Our job is to make it their life easy, to do their job well, because we all succeed when they do their job well. Right? So we need to know what the problems are. We need to know what the bottlenecks are, and we need to come. You know, I'm not coming up to the board because I think I have every answer to really any of these problems. Right? I'm coming up to the board so that I can listen to the people that might. Right? I don't know how to close the achievement gap, but I'm sure you're going to ask some teachers that, maybe speak Spanish and ask them what do we need to do and what's not being done. We have experts in this district. We need to utilize them and lean on them.
Megan, how do you see a collaboration between WGEA and the school board in support of our students and staff?
I think that's a really great question. There's a lot that I don't know about the union, and I'm interested in learning more. I think it's important to have that open door policy. There are things that I will never understand as a board member without that collaboration, without really the boots on the ground and that open line of communication. So I really encourage that thoughtful exchange of information. What can I do to make your job better? But that goes both ways. How can I make your job easier? And what do you need are questions that need to be going both ways, because it needs to be a collaboration. It's not, a working relationship does not happen solely from the top down. For example, if the board gave direction to the superintendent and there was never any feedback from the superintendent back up, the board would not know where some of our shortcomings are. We would not know areas that needed improvement. And it would be the same for the union. We really need those open lines of communication from the union back up to the board.
And Darlene, how do you see a collaboration between WGEA and the school board in support of our students and staff?
I don't know if many of you know this, but I'm from Chicago. We moved here when I was like 8 years old. And when I started with the school district, I was talking to my dad. I said, this school board, there's a union. And before I even got that out, he said, you join it. Because unions you just join it. So that's what I did. And I wasn't really sure what the union did for me, but they would meet with us and just talk to us about retirement things. And at the time I was like 24 or 25. So I was like, retirement, I don't need any of that stuff. But really understanding that early was so important, because by the time you're my age now, it's kind of late to be thinking about that if you didn't have somebody in your corner to help you with those things. So one thing I would really love to see is regular meetings between WGEA and the school board. Because even though, WGEA has been here forever, and even though the people change in the positions, and the same with the board, the system is still there. And WGEA has so many resources to come and talk to the school board. We are not the only school district dealing with a lot of these issues. And WGEA, the union, they talk to all the other unions that are in the state, and they can give us feedback from, what are other school districts that are in the same position as us doing? What are other rural schools doing? I would think that, there's a lot of resource there and a lot of professional knowledge there that we could get from WGEA. Because, as both of my other panelists have said, not everybody has the answers to everything. Not everybody knows the ins and outs of every single thing in the school, on the school board. There's a lot. Schools are a big machine. There's a lot of parts to it. And if we could have input from, things that are working in districts that are like ours, I think it would be in our best interest to tap into that resource.
Megan, you'll start our next question here. How will you ensure Garfield RE-2 follows board policies and procedures with fidelity, even when you personally disagree with them or face community pressure?
This is an excellent question. I really appreciate this. I think it's important, the policy and procedure put in place, and that's exactly what the board has done with norms in establishing policies as well. Our commitment is back to the community as a whole, not coming with an agenda, not coming to serve a particular purpose, not coming with a specific end goal in mind, other than providing a quality education to all of our students, support to our teachers, a safe place to educate, and a building block for our community. I believe schools should really be a foundation for all things in our community. That being said, it's crucial that our policies are both legal, okay? We've got, the board's got excellent legal representation and guidance in that area, and that we as board members put time and effort and diligence into crafting something that represents the voices of our community. So that this isn't necessarily an issue that we have to be concerned with about following policy. It becomes second nature. But when that issue arises, I believe that it's all incumbent upon the board to be good stewards of that policy and procedure, to follow it to the letter. Board policies should leave little area for gray. Okay, it should be very cut and dry as to how the board is going to proceed in any given matter.
Darlene, how will you ensure Garfield RE-2 follows board policies and procedures with fidelity, even when you personally disagree with them or face community pressure?
The board policies and procedures are there to make sure that every student gets the quality education that they deserve. So as we look at the policy, it's going, if it's not, I mean, I can't imagine that we even have a policy that isn't good for all of our kids. So, like Megan said, I mean, the gray areas, if what we're doing is what's best for every single one of our students, then we're following policies and procedures with fidelity. And having a team of people on the school board, I think, you're not going to always agree. So you can disagree without being disagreeable, but it comes back to what does the policy actually say? What does the procedure actually say? And if we have every single student in mind, and what's best for every single student in our school district, I think that it will be quite easy to follow the policies and procedures that we have in place.
And Steve, how will you ensure Garfield RE-2 follows board policies and procedures with fidelity, even when you personally disagree with them or face community pressure?
So I spent my 10 years teaching, all but one were in alternative high school. So if you're not consistent with your policy and implementation, you will have a very bad time. And the reality is I'm not a lawyer. And I don't know enough, so to me, the idea of not following the policy, so if I don't like the policy and I disagree with the policy, or if the community disagrees with the policy, then that's actually the board's job is to change said policy, right? But that policy is in place and that's what we follow, because who am I to say not to, right? And, clear, consistent expectations and, that's just consistent implementation. Again, my goal is to avoid chaos. Nothing thrives in chaos, especially on a shoestring budget. We have a shoestring budget. My goal is to get rid of chaos, in every aspect. So by going against policies and riling up the community, it's a moot point.
Darlene, we'll ask the next question to you. What will you do to make sure the board's action and decisions are transparent and accessible to the public?
Our board does a really nice job with having their agendas posted ahead of time, and very clear, most of the time, very clearly about what they're doing. And then everything is recorded, so people can either attend the session or you can watch it via Zoom. You don't even have to be there to see what's happening. So everything is discussed that can be discussed, aside from the things that are closed session, which they don't have, that's part of the policy. There are some things that have to be in closed session that we don't get to hear about. But I think one thing that could change is if there's a policy change or a procedure change that is coming up that they're thinking about discussing, there needs to be plenty of time for the public to know about that, and for parents and staff and whoever, all the stakeholders need to be able to know about this ahead of time. And it needs to be, I think, more clear. And I've seen some of the agendas that just say this policy, but then, I mean, that book is pretty big if you've ever tried to look for a policy. But perhaps, being very clear about this is the policy that we're looking at, this is what we're thinking about changing, and this is why it needs to be done ahead of time. That would be my only suggestion.
Steve, what will you do to make sure the board's actions and decisions are transparent and accessible to the public?
Yeah, I think, I think Parent Square is a great addition for the district. Right now, like every week we get, an email, a text, and an app notification every time there's a board message, reminder with a link to the Zoom, and then right from there you can watch the video, right? So I think anybody that's interested in what the board has to say certainly has an ample opportunity to see it. And I think with communication on the board, we're working for the public, and whatever we're emailing or whatever, I would assume is a public document, right? So if I'm going to put it in writing, it's going to be something that I stand by. And if I say it in a meeting, that's being kind of thoughtful with your words. And if there's issues that need to be addressed, then that's part of the board is to come up with policy. If the community has a feeling that there's things that are missing, bring it to the table. That's what public comment's for. We have, DAC, district accountability, school accountability. I think that the families have a lot of opportunity to, give feedback and certainly to attend.
And Megan, what will you do to make sure the board's action and decisions are transparent and accessible to the public?
I think this is something that we do extremely well already as a board and as a district. I think we've got a lot of communication that goes out, and I would agree with Steve that there's a lot of opportunity also for parent engagement as well as stakeholder and community engagement. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, we see a lot of those positions vacant, or we see a lot of the community that's not really getting involved until something comes up where they feel supercharged about a particular bit of information or want their voices heard. And what I would say as an active board member now is that it's really important for you to engage with consistency to help guide the board. It's really important that we be able to hear the community voices to understand exactly what the tone and the direction that the stakeholders want to see the district go in. It really has to be a collaboration. It cannot be an us versus them. There are a lot of opportunities for parent engagement, and I really encourage those in the community that are wondering what's going on in our schools to step inside, to give just an hour of your time. It's not a huge commitment in most cases. You could sign up for every committee, and that's a rather hefty lift. But really, these engagement communities are really just asking for about an hour of your time once a month, sometimes twice a month. It's not a heavy lift, but it is a huge impact back to our community.
Steve, we'll ask the next question to you first. How comfortable are you with listening to community voices that may differ from your own views? And how will you incorporate that feedback into board decision making?
Yeah, I think having a civil conversation among people that disagree is harder and harder to do. And I think there's a point where you have to ignore the noise and focus on the signal, right? So where do these things matter? Where do our differences matter? We can gripe about a lot of things that have no impact on our kids, and we can get really mad at each other and yell and scream. And if we start making policies according to those things that don't have impact, or if we start focusing energy, then we just get into a tailspin, right? So I think, district accountability, I'm involved in district accountability, school accountability, PTA, and there's people from all opinions, and we get along great, we have good conversations, and we actually get something done, right? So if we could bring that to this boardroom, I think that's great. So I think I'm very comfortable listening with two people that don't agree with me. And I think usually when you talk to people in a civil way, you figure out that you don't agree, but your differences are a matter of nuance as opposed to a cave that cannot be, or a crevasse that cannot be passed, right? But yeah, people are going to sow chaos for the sake of chaos, and I'm happy to ignore that.
Megan, how comfortable are you with listening to community voices that may differ from your own views? And how will you incorporate that feedback into board decision making?
For those of you that don't know, I spent 20 years as a law enforcement officer. I'm fairly versed in being able to speak with people who don't necessarily hold my personal viewpoint or even a governmental viewpoint. That being said, I think it's really important. One thing I want to just take a moment and point out to all of you is that I appreciate all of you coming out to support the candidates. There's 2 open board seats and there's 3 people here. We're not that far off. We really aren't. If you spoke to each one of us about the global view and our direction for the school board, I would say, I feel pretty confidently that we all want student success. We might go about it slightly different, but the benefit here is that we're all in this to support a student, okay, who eventually is going to move into our community and be the new generation of the bedrock, the foundation of this wonderful community. There's a reason why we're all here. There's a reason why there's more applicants for 2 board seats. This is a wonderful opportunity, and I agree with Steve, is that we focus so much on our discord in how we are different than how we are the same, okay? We all came with 3 slightly different viewpoints on how we accomplish the same goal, which is student success. And I think that is a blessing here that we sometimes overlook, is that we get so hyper-focused in the nuances and how my plan's better than your plan because of X, Y, and Z, instead of just saying, what is it that maybe we can pick and choose from each that is going to strengthen or unify a forward movement. And that's really the goal of the board, is it's 5 individual voices united as one for student success.
Darlene, how comfortable are you with listening to community voices that may differ from your own views? And how will you incorporate that feedback into board decision making?
It's basically an echo of what my 2 other panel members have said. You can disagree without being disagreeable. And when you're in education, you're going to hear from the community all the time, no matter what your position is. If you're the bus driver, if you're the librarian, if you're the teacher, if you are, no matter who you are in the school, you're going to hear from the community in some way or another. And looking at decision making, it just really comes down to what, is this something that would be best, good for all of our kids? And if it's not, then, you have to kind of figure out what is it that they, sometimes they come to you and they're just mad about something, but it's not really that thing that they're angry about, it's something else entirely. So they're angry and they think it's about, recess or whatever, but it's maybe it's not really about recess. So listening to the community and listening to their concerns, because they are concerns. If they're coming to you and talking to you about them, then it's a concern of theirs. So, but it does really just come down to, is this what's best for all of our students?
Megan, we'll start the next question with you. What specific strategies will you use to maintain open, two-way communication with staff, parents, and the broader community once elected?
Again, I'm going to echo that I believe that the district is doing a pretty good job of this, at least in the recent year. We've had a lot of opportunity to grow in this area because this has been one of the areas that the district has consistently fallen less than proficient upon. I really think that there is a great communication between the district and parents. We've got to figure out how to open up that line of engagement from parents. However, I think part of it is meeting parents where they're at. We, for so long as an educational system, have expected for parents to come into the building to have a conversation. There's plenty of opportunity for conversation outside of the building and engaging them where they're at. Sometimes that is a school barbecue, or the elementary schools are really great with the ice cream socials. The district, however, just because of, let me start out. The board specifically has specific rules to follow. The communication can come one way. So we're happy to hear the concerns that parents have, our community and stakeholder members have, but we as individual board members don't speak for the board. We speak as a unified voice. So I always encourage, and in the last few months that I've been sitting on the board, I've had quite a few people come. Either it's the same people that have concerns that they've already brought and haven't felt addressed, or they're brand new concerns with community members and stakeholders that I have personal relationships with. But either way, I've received several of those questions and concerns, and my response back to them is we really need to hear this as a board. So I encourage you to come in for public comments. I encourage you to send emails to the board. I encourage you to voice your concern, because sometimes just saying it out loud is the proper movement to finally receive some answers for some of these concerns. I think too often what we do, or what's encouraged in our community, is social media campaign against whatever issue that you've taken to heart, instead of bringing it to the board for real action. And there's not much that the board can do off of a social media campaign.
Darlene, what specific strategies will you use to maintain two-way communication with staff, parents, and the broader community once elected?
I will say I agree that there's so much communication that goes back and forth from the schools. I don't know how many times I get an email and a text message and a voicemail. So I think, the communication is there. I do think that we do have social media battles that don't really get anybody anywhere except for angry. And if there is a real concern, then it does need to be brought specifically to the board or to the school or to the principal or to the superintendent, just because otherwise nothing's going to get solved. But I also think that sometimes people continue to bring, Megan mentioned, the same people keep coming just because they didn't get the answer they want necessarily on their issue. But overall, I think the board and the schools have a lot of open communication. One thing I would also like to see is, the board they have people come in, like from Open Door, to come in and talk about, people from the community come in and talk about what they're doing in the community. I think that the more of that we can have, so that we understand what resources are out there for our families, so we can help provide those wraparound supports for families that maybe the school itself can't provide, but people in our community can. And so I would encourage more of that with the board.
Steve, what specific strategies will you use to maintain open, two-way communication with staff, parents, and the broader community once elected?
I think that probably my first thought is to just show up, right? I want to see it for us, what's going on at the high school science fair. I'll be very disappointed if there's no high school science fair. And Yeah, I mean, already at the DAC meetings, SAC meetings, the PTA, and that's where, there's, I love the conversation in the parking lot and the hallway, things of that sort. So, yeah, if there, I intend to show up, and if there's something that somebody on the board should see, hopefully people tell me about it. I've been working on signing into Facebook for the first time this week in like 10 years. I don't know that I'll stick with that, but I'm trying. I'm going to give it a go. It doesn't seem very productive though. But yeah, I mean, our emails are posted. The community involvement is a huge priority, and I mean, from everything that I sit in, everybody's trying to reach out, and we get the same families that show up, right? So the opportunities are there. Call me, email me, send me a thing on Facebook if you're nice, and tap me on the shoulder at, when I'm picking up my kid.
Darlene, what are your top 3 priorities for our school district if elected, and how will you put them into action?
The first priority that we've discussed is the teacher recruitment, like making sure that we recruit high quality teachers and that we keep them, as well as our certified staff, classified staff, both. We need to recruit high quality people and keep them. And I think looking at, our benefits package, looking at housing opportunities for our teachers and staff is a good place to start. The other thing that I think needs to be a priority is the achievement gap between our Latino students and our white students. Like 20 years ago, we didn't have students coming in that didn't speak English in our classrooms. And then all of a sudden, like within 3 years of me starting teaching, we had so many kids coming in and we didn't know what to do with them. And my principal at the time was Mr. Hesse, who was amazing at Esmalois, and he said, we need help. And he got us help right away. But that was like 27 years ago, 28 years ago, and we're still dealing with the same thing. The achievement for our Latino students should be accelerated. It should be more, if we're doing the right things, their achievement should be accelerated, and it has not been. And then the last thing, I think we need to focus on the strategic plan. We do have a good plan, and listening to our school board, or the school superintendent talk to the school board about the Unified Improvement Plan, I've written a lot of those things, and to be fair and honest, it was you write the plan, and then we would not look at the plan again until the next year when we had to write the plan again. So now they're looking at it like we're bringing, and each school would sit at their own table to do their own plan. But now, instead of doing it that way, they're bringing everybody together to talk about the big plan, everybody's plan. And it's not just looking at my data from my school, it's looking at the data from everybody's school. Because you'll see signs all over in the school district that all of our kids are all of our kids. And we are starting to look at the UIP that way. So everyone is looking at the data, everyone is building it. It's a group effort as far as we're all looking at school data. We're all building these goals. And that is a different way of looking at the Unified Improvement Plan. I think they should change the name to the Unified Improvement Process, because it's not just a plan that we put away when we're done. It's a process where they're planning on bringing it back and looking at it again and again and again. So it's not going to be a one-shot deal where we look at the end and go, oh, we didn't meet our goal. Well, write it in there again, because that's how it's been for a while. So those are the things that I think our priorities are.
Steve, what are your top 3 priorities for our school district if elected, and how will you put them into action?
So my step 1 is focus on the strategic plan, right? We have a plan in place that all the stakeholders have agreed upon, and we need to be laser focused on executing that plan. And as Darlene mentioned, I think there's significant steps already on the way to start that process in a tighter and more organized way. That's our best bet for immediate improvement with our kids, in my opinion. The plan's in place. We may have strayed on the focus a little bit in recent times, and let's get back to focus. And a focused effort is going to get better results, in my opinion, kind of unquestionably. And then we need to secure a long-term funding improvement plan. Like, how are we going to? So we can't fix this tomorrow or next year, even, but we need to start looking at what are we going to do in 5 or 10 years when we have that map. When our teachers start retiring, we already can't fill the positions. We need to start figuring this out now, and that has to be, again, laser focused on that. And then with those two things, and with proper funding and a clear plan, that's when we really, in my opinion, start seeing the improvement on the achievement gaps and special ed programs that are just in desperate need of, teachers, paraprofessionals, help in general, and relying on those outside sources for additional expertise, resources, whatever that might look like.
Megan, what are your top 3 priorities for our school district if elected, and how will you put them into action?
My top 3 are partnering with families, future-ready student success, and smart, sustainable growth. Partnering with families is super important to me. I believe since COVID, education in general, nationwide, has lost a lot of parent trust. And I think it is imperative, especially if we are looking for valuable feedback from the stakeholders, i.e. the parents, that we rebuild that trust that has been lost. And it's not that so much that the district has necessarily done anything wrong. It's just there's just this general air of distrust that we need to work hard to rebuild. We need to really engage our families again. Schools used to be the cornerstone for any particular community, and it's really unfortunate that we've lost that. We've got to figure out how to get back there, and I think it's really through transparency. It's building those trust relationships again, so that the school returns to the foundation of the community. Everything should center around the schools, in my opinion, and we've lost that in recent years. As far as future-ready student success, I think it's imperative that we not necessarily or not only teach to a test, but that we teach to life skills. I can't tell you how often I hear my kid left without X, Y, and Z. And it's really unfortunate. And I will say that this solution is 2-part. Some of it is the lack of engagement of parents at home, and they, with the extreme expectation that the school pick up that burden. But it's also that the schools are essentially overtaxed and overburdened themselves and have become pseudo-parents for a larger community. I think it's really important that we shift our focus and not just be raising up students that are college ready, because as we know, not every student will be college bound, and we're really doing a disservice to those kids that are not choosing a collegiate career. Why are we not, and I will say Garfield County does an amazing job with this, but there's definitely more room for improvement, but why are we not spending more time in the trades? Why are we not helping somebody to understand what real life looks like when they walk across the stage? That shouldn't be the culmination of the greatest thing that they will ever achieve. That should just be the starting block. And it doesn't mean that you have to go on to move to a 4-year college. It means that, are you truly prepared to be a productive member of our community? And if the answer is we're not sure, then the school needs to figure out as a community how we're going to pick that up and do a better job. And then the last one, smart, sustainable growth. There's a budget reserve question. I'm going to answer a lot of that a little bit later, but I think it's really important that we're fiscally responsible. We are in an era right now that economically it's hard for families, and we need to be better stewards of all of the money that we've been entrusted to. There is better ways to spend some of the money so that the student specifically prospers and is ready for real world.
Steve, we'll start with you with this question. The district and board have been discussing the possibility of moving from a 4-day-a-week to a 5-day week. Where do you stand on this? What do you see as the benefits and drawbacks of each option for students, staff, and families?
I personally don't like the 4-day week, and my wife loves the 4-day week, right? And the reality of our situation is that's where we're at, and I don't know that we should spend the time and resources to switch it back for several reasons. One, it unfortunately, what started off as a cost-saving measure has now turned into one of our biggest benefits to our staff, which in my opinion is sad, but that's the reality that we're at, right? We've got to give them, there's got to be a carrot at the end of the day. But it's a huge burden on our families. I work Monday through Friday, so when my wife works on Fridays, it's a problem, right? And I'm more fortunate in many ways than, we could deal with it. And I can't imagine having to deal with it 10 years ago or at several other points in my life, or I know other people have. It's got to be crippling. The reality is it was a cost-saving measure, so we'd have to look at, can we afford to go back? And how many teachers would we lose? And what would this cost us? So I don't think the district is in any place at the moment to make that change.
Megan, the district and board have been discussing the possibility of moving from a 4-day week to a 5-day week. Where do you stand on this? What do you see as the benefits and drawbacks of each option for students, staff, and families?
I also would prefer a 5-day school week for a variety of reasons, but I understand why the community has really rallied around the 4-day. I was a brand new mom putting my now 21-year-old daughter, who has a baby of her own, on her first day of kindergarten the first year that this took effect. That's how long this has been a policy in the district. It was hard. It was hard for a kindergartner, a very young elementary school student, to have that day lengthened considerably to accommodate the number of student contact hours that were needed to make a 4-day work. And it was done based on budget. There would be some issues with transitioning back to 5-day, but the board is really looking at this from an analytical standpoint at this point. It's not that the board is leaning one particular way versus another. It's quite honestly, and maybe what's leading this is, even if it's a little bit more expensive for us to do, does this close the achievement gap? And that's the reality here, guys, is that it may be inconvenient, and it might honestly be the very thing that helps us to staff some of these positions, because it is a perk. I totally get it. But in the nuts and bolts question, the answer is, does a 5-day school week improve student achievement? And that's something that the board has got to start asking ourselves. Because if we're serious, if we're really serious about making sure our kids are prepared for life, can we do it by just elongating the days? Are we losing some instructional focus by creating a day that is an hour and a half longer? Doesn't sound like a lot, but for our littles, it's extreme. Okay, so it's really about what is best for the kids. And I applaud the board for making these decisions, or for asking these questions, not making the decisions, because that is yet to be made. I applaud the board for asking these tough choices, because can you imagine how much fire the board is going to come under if this is the actual recommendation to truly improve quality test scores? So formally, my stance is I prefer the 5-day, but I go where achievement goes. And that's what I stand. I will fight the fight for achievement.
Darlene, the district and board have been discussing the possibility of moving from a 4-day to a 5-day week. Where do you stand on this, and what do you see as the benefits and the drawbacks of each option for students, staff, and families?
I was that mom dropping off her kindergartner at really early in the morning, it felt like, and then picking her up really late. I would pick her up at kindergarten at Walmsley, and then by the time I got to the middle school to pick up our son, she was sound asleep, like dead asleep. So I agree. For our littles, it is a really long day. It is a really long day. And I mean, as a parent, I would want the 5-day school week. And again, with the daycare, I don't know how parents are doing it. I don't know how parents are doing it with a 5-day school week, to be honest, because I mean, daycare is a whole other thing. So I think that, the benefits were because we were told when it was first kind of rolled out that it was for financial reasons. But again, we know that that's not the case anymore. So revisiting this, I think, is a smart thing, and asking our community what they think, because I think they're the ones, the students are really impacted and the families are really impacted by this decision. So there are benefits I always felt happy that I got an extra day with my kids, but I will also tell you that there are probably very few teachers in our school district who don't work on Friday. That's when they do their lesson plans. That's when they plan for the next week and make all the copies that they have to make and get everything together for the next week, because everybody has a planning period, but they don't get to plan during those periods. It's meetings, meeting for this, meeting for that, meeting together for this. So most of our teachers use that time on Friday to plan for the next week. So they are already, a lot of them are working just without the kids there. So yeah, as a mom, I liked having that day with my kids until they were in middle school, and then I wanted them to go to school. Just kidding. But yeah, I think there are pros and cons for both things, and for different reasons. Yeah, it's a long day for those little kids. And I think it's a long day for high schoolers too, because they kind of act like second graders sometimes. But yeah, it's a long, I don't think that the board is going to be the ones that makes this decision. I think it will be the community, because we just had a survey that came out, so we'll see what they say.
Okay, we have arrived to our final question. Megan, you will be the first to answer. Garfield RE-2 has the second lowest teacher salaries in the area, while the district's unassigned reserves have grown from $16,612,954 just last year to $20,519,310 this year. That's about 1/3 of the district's entire budget. The state requires only 3% be held in reserves and recommends around 17%. How do you feel about this level of reserves? Do you think the district should continue holding that much money back, or do you believe that money should be put back into our schools? How do you think the money should be spent?
This is a very polarizing question, and it's complicated. And I'll try to make my answer not so complicated. Anybody that manages your own home budget, if I were to tell you that you had a third of what you were going to need in the bank to be able to pay your expenses for the entire year, you would feel pretty happy, right? Blessed. And that's really where the district is at. We are in a position that we are blessed. We are not scrambling like two of our neighboring districts where they're not sure how they're going to be able to even supply operationally. We're in a much better position. Now, I understand when we look at these numbers, this seems rather alarming, okay? But you wouldn't run your house budget with less than what you needed in an emergency situation. This is a rather large emergency fund, if you will. However, when you take into consideration that wages and benefits, so salary and benefits of our staff is the vast majority, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, so I'm going to give you an estimate, but let's just say on the low end, 75 to 80% of what the school district spends is in salary. This is essential. It also, spending $20 million if we were to spend our reserves down to just the minimum 3% or even the 17 you recommended, doesn't allow us to spend that much more on each individual teacher. It's not that I'm not advocating for that, okay? Please do not hear that. I absolutely am advocating for higher wages. This is smart, responsible spending. What this question doesn't frame is the millions and millions of dollars of capital improvements that are needed on our buildings that have been held back for financial reasons, for security. It's new roofs and sidewalks and playground equipment that our schools actually need, but we have not gone out and spent because we're in a really tumultuous time right now. So please hear that I empathize with the desire to move this $20 million into tangible benefits for the people that are most important in our district, which is our staff. This is not saying that I do not believe that they are not worth every penny of this. It's when we have a major water main break or a hole in a roof, or we have something catastrophic happens, we've got to rely on these reserves to be able to continue to provide education to status quo. Additionally, because of the tumultuous times that we are in, both state and nationally with budgets, we cannot spend these down. We cannot afford to spend these down to the required 3% and possibly the recommended 17% without putting ourselves in a very precarious position financially. So we've got to figure out what's coming in from the state and what's coming in from the feds before we decide where any of this money goes.
Darlene, how do you feel about this level of reserves? Do you think the district should continue holding that much money back, or do you believe that money should be put back into our schools? How do you think the money should be spent?
I think that the money does get put back into our schools. I mean, because we have this money, and especially exactly what Megan said about capital. I mean, we just had, not too long ago, I think it was Highland, or no, it was Cactus Valley had a leaky roof, and that was one of our newest buildings. And they had, if we didn't have this money in reserve, they would not have been able to fix that. And then, you know, the improvements that they've been able to do with the air handlers because of COVID, being able to move air the way that we do now, we wouldn't have been able to do any of that. And, you know, the safety features that we're putting into our schools, we wouldn't have been able to do any of that. I mean, 33% is a lot of money to have sitting, but honestly, there are districts that would do some serious damage to be us. They would be really, you know, this is a good thing that we're not just spending money left and right on things. And you know, the teacher salaries would be, you know, a great place to put this, but we're not going to have $20 million in reserve every year. So this isn't going to support salaries for forever. So especially in the climate that we're in right now, I would absolutely say we need to keep this money, and then, maybe later on down the road, it might be something that could be dispersed for something specific, but not right now.
And Steve, how do you feel about this level of reserves? Do you think the district should continue holding that money back, or do you believe that money should be put back into our schools? How do you think the money should be spent?
Yeah, I agree that especially, if you pay attention to the current situation nationally and by the state, the problem, or the funding is not getting any better, right? So I think having this is kind of shows that we're trying to be, fiscally responsible. Is it more than we should have? Maybe. I haven't, I would ask the question, why do we have this, right? So again, the numbers alone say something like, yeah, 33% is double what the recommendation, but yeah, read the news of what's happening in states around us, where all it takes is one statewide policy and your funding goes down 25% in a year, and you're closing buildings and firing schools, right? So this tells me that we can weather a year, maybe two, of that without starting to lay off workers, right? And I think that's what the community needs to understand, is that we're dealing on a line of, the district has a strong, you could argue if you show up to the meetings, if you look at the budgets, there's very little, there's nothing to waste, right? The money is accounted for, and it is waste is, you could argue nickels and dimes, but larger, this is all salaries, right? So if we increase the salaries by $5 million a year, this reserve goes to zero in 4 years, right? We have recurring and we have one-time expenses, right? So, and sometimes, it takes money to save money. So if we have an extra few million in the bank and there's something that we should go for, it's nice to have that, right? So do I think we should spend it on schools? Absolutely. If I think there's an acute, something, this is where we have to talk to the teachers, we have to talk to the experts doing these jobs. Is there something that the district desperately needs that would make a huge impact on our achievement gap, on our special education department? And if the answer is yes, then maybe that is worth spending this money on a little bit. But man, right now, going into the next however many years, I am very thankful that our district has this problem and not the opposite problem. Yeah.
Well, that concludes the school board candidate forum. Thank you all for taking the time to attend tonight's event.